Well, my name is George Grayson, and I go by the name of G to the Next Level, and I have a YouTube channel that mainly surrounds around retro gaming in the modern age. So I talk about like childhood memories, new gaming systems that come out now that actually handle retro gaming, talk about countdown lists, and of course, most of all, Sonic the Hedgehog, because I'm a huge fan, been a fan of him since 91, been a fan of the Genesis since 91. I have a near complete, actually I have a full complete now, US retail Sega Genesis collection. I've been into it since 91 and not looking back.
Yeah, so retro gaming, that's kind of an interesting thing, especially because, I assume we're around the same age and we grew up with a lot of these games and playing these game systems. And we seem to be in this age where, nostalgia is kind of the thing. It's the cool thing to look back at these old properties and these old systems, and people are really interested in these classics. And particularly because I feel like, this is when video games were really starting to become something new, like this new form of media. The late 80s and the early 90s were when video games really took off and became really popular. People were making, there was The Wizard, that movie came out in the late 80s that kind of brought video games into the popular culture. So what is it, just from your perspective, about that gaming culture that has made it endure for so long and keeps people interested in these classic games? And for you, what keeps you interested in these classic games from years ago?
I think a lot of it stems from not only your own childhood memories, but a lot of it also stems from character and imagination. I think when it comes to video games, one of the biggest things is that the fact you can't really do this sort of things in real life. You can't, especially with like the older style games like Mario and Sonic and whatnot. These are just, you see these characters, you see these worlds, and everything is kind of basically, it really gets you going. Mm-hmm. And I think that with video games, the reason why it's stuck around for so long and has evolved throughout this time is because it's a way to kind of escape from reality. But there also is that sort of case of how video games are art. And video games are becoming more and more art. That's why you're seeing more video games get turned into movies. And that's why it's become such a big part of our culture. It's amazing how it's become now.
Yeah. Well, and another aspect of this is, video games are more popular now than they ever have been. And so many new games are coming out constantly. But what is it about specifically the classics that, especially for you thinking about these old Sonic games? Obviously, nowadays, most Sonic games are 3D. Sometimes they blend the 3D and the 2D, but when you compare a newer Sonic game to, say, Sonic 3, what is it about Sonic 3 that makes you want to go back and play that game again?
See, funny you mentioned Sonic 3, because that's actually my favorite Sonic game.
It's a lot of people's. It's one of mine, too. Yeah.
Yep, Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Gotta get the full experience. But I think it's because that game really captures Sonic to the core. It's like basically you go from point A to point B, run as fast, but it also is the first one to really kind of expand upon everything. The levels were bigger. There was a lot more than just going from point A to point B. There are multiple facets of trying to learn about Knuckles and everything. It's just there's so much more to that game that I feel that a lot of the newer ones just kind of miss, which is interesting because the newer ones have such expansive storylines, characters upon characters upon characters, but at the same time, it doesn't grab you like those. Now, I know some people prefer 3D Sonic, like my wife, for example. She loves 3D Sonic. She's not really a huge fan of 2D Sonic.
Yeah.
Me, I like both, but I think 2D Sonic just really captures the essence, and that's why Sonic 3, compared to something like the newer ones, like Sonic Mania. Have you played Sonic Mania?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, see, Sonic Mania does a really good job of going back to that style, and it really feels good while still introducing enough of something new. But then you got Sonic Forces, which is a good, competent game in itself, but unfortunately a lot of people didn't really give it that much of a chance because it's not really what they remember. It also doesn't help that they released it at the same time as Mania, so but I guess it just really comes down to personal preference. But some people prefer 2D, some people prefer 3D. But I think that's why Sonic 3 just in itself is just the ultimate Sonic experience, I guess I could really say.
This is something that I find I have difficulty explaining to people, the appeal of watching other people play video games. I don't know what it is. I love it. I watch speedruns, I watch games done quick and things like that. I watch other streamers. But for some people it's hard to kind of understand the appeal of that. So from that perspective, what is it about watching somebody instead of not playing a game yourself? We should be clear that when you're watching a streamer, you're sitting at your computer, watching them on YouTube or Twitch or whatever, watching them play a video game. What is it about that experience that is so appealing, especially now when that's a lucrative form of work? I mean, people earn money doing this. What is it about streaming? What is it about the appeal of watching somebody play a video game?
Well, I'm more of a static kind of creator myself. Like I stream every now and then, but most of my stuff is mainly like, reviews and retrospectives and all that kind of stuff. But I do feel that when it comes down to watching people stream and play video games, I think it really comes down to two forms. One, they like to see somebody who's, at my job we call it an SME. It's basically like a subject matter expert. Some people want to see somebody who's really good at the game, maybe help them learn how to play better, and there's that bit of intrigue. And then there's the other side where you have this sort of, what's the word? It has this sort of anticipation of realizing, hey, what happens next? So it's just like, especially if you're watching somebody who's really good at the game or who's not really good at the game, how are they going to react to it? A lot of it has to do with their personality. And that's what I always found. It's like, when it comes to either YouTube or streaming, it's like, yeah, you could talk about any game under the sun. It's like, you really could, but at the end of the day, it comes down to your personality and your own personal attachment to said game. And I think that conveys out into the audience. People realize that.
Mm-hmm. With video game culture, like I said, video games are more popular now than ever. They're sort of an intrinsic part of the culture. They're, kind of on the same level as movies and TV. I mean, it's a pastime that just about everyone has experienced at some point, and it's incredibly popular. What, for you, stands out about video games as compared to other media? What is the difference in experiencing a video game as opposed to going to a movie or reading a book, or what is appealing about that experience for you?
I think it's because it's more active media versus passive media. That's probably the biggest thing out of all. You feel like you really are a part of the experience. I mean, when it comes to movies, you're just basically, okay, you feel emotionally invested, but you're also still aren't tapping into that portion of your emotion where you feel like you are actually in control, where you are making a difference. When you're watching a movie, you're just like, okay, this is what happens and now it's the end. Maybe something else might happen later, maybe a sequel, maybe a TV series, who knows? But at that point, your session is done. Whereas with video games, you could keep going back and playing it over and over and still continue to find new things that you never realized before. And then there are the games that have online multiplayer, like say something like Overwatch, that you can consistently get something new every single time that you play. There's never, the experience never ends, really, at that point. I mean, there are some, like say RPGs or however, that, okay, yeah, it's over, but then you move on to the next game, and then now you're still a part of that experience. And then going into movies and TV shows, you still are emotionally attached to said characters. You can actually feel what that person or that character is really emotionally going through versus actually just watching it on a screen. It hits in the heart a little bit more, I think, for people who really play video games versus watching a TV show or a movie. Yeah, for sure. Streamer,
what was the spark that made you say, I would love to film myself and talk about video games and make this a part of my life?
Well, because I love sharing stories. I think that's one of the biggest things about it, is that when you're collecting different things, you can talk to people and just be like, oh, okay, well, I've got this game, this game, this game, and this game. Hey, that's great. Do you have any sort of attachment? What's the story behind it? I have a series on my YouTube channel called 3 Gaming Items I'm Proud to Own. It's one of my favorite series that I love making because I pick items in my collection that I have stories that I love to tell about. Like the last one that I did, I talked about how I got a copy of Lethal Enforcers. It was a really controversial light gun game back in the day that my parents didn't want me having, but somehow I managed to get a copy of it, and it's a really funny story. It's those sort of things that I feel are inspired, that I really want to share with everybody. Games that I feel that maybe have gotten overlooked, that you should really check out, those sort of things. Again, all about Sonic the Hedgehog. I love talking about Sonic. I mean, I love talking about the movies, talking about the games, talking about the TV shows, the comics, just really. And then I think one of the other biggest things is that when sharing it and you're getting those comments back and you're getting those heartfelts back and people explain, it's like, oh, you've inspired me to do this. Thank you. You've really brought that memory out of my mind. Now I want to go back and play that game. It's a feeling that can't be touched.
Yeah.
And yes, or matched.
Sure, yeah, and that's another interesting aspect of it, in that when you're doing something that you're sharing with the public, depending on the medium that you're sharing it on, there is a chance for interaction with the people that are viewing this, and and people can share their comments, or, you know, sometimes some people can get criticized for certain things, but
Right.
I'm curious, did you go into this with a particular mindset of, were you worried about being so connected to your viewers, or was that not something you were concerned about? Were you pleasantly surprised when people started commenting on your videos the first time?
I think it was really, I could say it's not really something that I was surprised about, because truth be told, before I started my own YouTube channel, I was a co-host on another YouTube channel before that, so that kind of helped break the ice a little bit. But when it comes to whether you do YouTube videos like me, whether you stream on Twitch, whether you do any of that, you're going to get criticism. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of just taking that criticism and realizing, hey, is this something true, or is it just somebody that's being a troll? You gotta have that bulldog skin, I like to call it. So you gotta have that. You're gonna get that from time to time. But it's just that, did I really see that this was gonna roll into being as big as it is now? No, definitely not. Yeah. But I will say that it's nice to see how you gradually get that audience.
So we've talked about your career and all the things that you do. We talked a little bit about Sonic, but I want to dive a little bit deeper, just because we're sitting right now, and behind me is this massive shrine of Sonic everything. I mean, you've got Sonic action figures, you've got Hot Wheels that are they Sonic design, or?
Oh, those are all Sega.
Oh, Sega Hot Wheels.
Yeah, those are like, one's Jet Set Radio, one is Shinobi, one is Super Monkey
So they're
Ball.
all themed after Sega games.
Right.
There's other collectibles. You've got a DVD of the Sonic movie, the original Sonic movie, the animated one that came out in the 90s, which I used to love as a kid. Yeah, there's Sonic everything here. It's just a sea of blue with occasional yellow and red from Tails and Knuckles. What is it about Sonic? I mean, obviously you liked the games and they appealed to you, but sure, there's got to be something beyond that, right? Like, what about that character? What about this universe really appealed to you that made you that made you say, I want to start collecting Sonic stuff?
I think it just comes down to his personality. That's really where it is, because there isn't very many video game characters, like mascot style characters out there, that really have the sort of heart that Sonic has. And it's not just about like, oh, it's his attitude, it's the fact that, you know, gotta go fast, all that fun stuff, you know, memes everywhere. But at the end of the day, he's got a heart of gold. And it really conveys in pretty much every type of media that we've had with Sonic. And I felt that since the very beginning. And then once they expanded that out of the games and Sonic started to have more of a character and a voice, when we got the comic books, when we got the first cartoon, every piece of Sonic media that has actually come through, even though he has different slight changes in his attitude, it still all comes down to one core thing. He does what he does for his friends. And it's just that sort of, it's always been like a magnet for me. Now, I'm a huge fan of like platformers, like Mario, Sonic, Donkey Kong, Crash Bandicoot, Sly Cooper, like games like that. I'm a huge fan. I've always been. But there's just something different about Sonic. And I know whether you love him or hate him, you can't deny that character is infectious. Yeah. As you can see, that's why I've been collecting him for so long.
You've gotten the bug, basically. Yeah.
I've had the bug since 91.
Yeah, no, it's very cool.
Yep. And then it's just so wonderful seeing now, and not just because of the movie. It's because within the last couple of years, we know, because between like 2006 and say like right around the time that Sonic Mania really started making waves, there was kind of a lull in Sonic, and it was like the diehard fans like me were still sticking around, but then there were the ones that were just like, oh, I don't know, is it good, is it not, and however. But between Mania and between the new movie that's out, the fans have never been as happy. I'd probably say in like the last 10 years, maybe even 15. You know, it's awesome. It's awesome, and it inspires me to keep going. It inspires me to make more Sonic videos, because people love it. It's like, hey, it's like, we love this, we want more. So yeah, I want to give them more. Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about the movie a little bit. You've seen the movie. You're wearing a shirt with the character from the movie on it. Just what did you think of it, first of all? What was your reaction as soon as you saw it the first time? Well, when I saw it for the first time, I was just kind of floored at how well they managed to capture everything. Now, I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with the lead up going into the Sonic movie.
Big controversy over the design of the character and the backlash. Basically, they reacted to fan backlash and they redesigned him for the movie. Yep,
exactly. But if you really think about it, though, I think it was more than just a redesign. I think they went through and they kind of changed the tone and the pacing of the original trailer from the Sonic movie. You can tell that one had more of a darker and a sinister sort of vibe. He's basically saying, "Oh, I'm here to save the planet," that sort of thing. It was different. It was not the kind of lighthearted buddy comedy, road trip comedy that we got out of it. And to me, it was delightful. And from beginning to end, there was never a dull moment. They nailed his character. Again, it's like, even though this Sonic feels to be a little bit more innocent, a little bit more childish than some of the other Sonics, and it's explained in the movie without giving spoilers. But the thing is that it's still at his core, he does what he does for his friends. He made friends, and now he wants to protect them. And it's just, throughout the entire movie, that whole theme was just great. It's like, sure, it's cliched a lot of times, particularly like the bar scene, however. Like it happens, but to me, it was great. Ben Schwartz did an excellent job capturing Sonic. He really did. Great voiceover. James Marsden was delightful. And it was like the human characters had nearly just as much character as Sonic did. But of course, there's Jim Carrey as Eggman, who just destroyed it. Yeah. He didn't just nail it, he destroyed it. Like, it's just how good he got it. This is the 90s Jim Carrey that
I was about to say, it was fun to have the manic Jim Carrey that it very much reminded me of his turn as the Riddler in Batman 4.
Absolutely.
Like, it was that sinister, but still darkly funny, and he's the smartest person in the room kind of thing. It was very fun to see that.
And you can tell that this was a dream role for him. So like, he took it and he ran with it. And just the character dynamics between James Marsden's character and Sonic throughout the entire movie is just, it's wonderful. Mm-hmm. It's a sweet story. And the thing is that if you like feel-good movies, that's basically what it is. Is it the deepest movie out there? No. Are there holes in the plot? Absolutely. I know somebody like left a comment on one of my my lead-ups to the video that I'm making. They're just like, oh, I was like, why couldn't he have just ran from point A to point B, like, to get to San Francisco? And I'm just like, well, A, he doesn't know where he is. B, he's still kind of suffering from the effects of the tranquilizer that he got hit with. And then C, at the point, it's like, now he's kind of realized, all right, we've taken care of Eggman, Robotnik. So he's taken care of Robotnik. Now what? He's not really in that much of a rush. He's more about wanting to have a friend.
Right. That's the core of the movie. I mean, it's on his list, his bucket list.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, hey, these are all the things that I want to do. He's like, he's been stuck in a hole for almost his entire life with no interaction with the human public. But he's been watching movies, he's been watching TV. He's like, I want to do all of this. And sure enough, they did pretty much all of it in one night. Yeah. But yeah, it was great. The script was great, and just everything about it was awesome. And if you haven't seen it yet, stay after the credits. And watch your theater erupt when that happens. It sure did for the times that we saw it. In fact, we did a themed event at the Alamo Drafthouse the day before the movie came out. Like, basically, I paired up with the Houston Retro Gamers team. We had people that were there in cosplay. We had prizes. We had giveaways. We had a game set up. And it was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. But yeah, once that moment happened, like after the ending scene, the entire theater was like, ah! So, yeah, it's exciting. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that we now, along with, say, a few key others, like, say, Pokemon Detective Pikachu and a couple of others, that we finally have a video game movie.
That was going to be my next question, was about video game films. It's kind of had a tortured history, right? I mean, you think back to the Super Mario Brothers movie, which is one of the most reviled films of all time. I know it has a cult following, but just there are so many instances of producers and directors trying to adapt certain video games into movie form, and it just doesn't really work. It hasn't worked for a long time. I mean, I think one of the few exceptions was maybe the Resident Evil franchise, where they got a lot of mileage out of that. But yeah, and it seems like recently, like you said, with Detective Pikachu and with this new Sonic movie, a lot of gamer fans are really happy with the product that's been put out by these filmmakers. And so I'm wondering what this, does this bode well for the future of video game adaptations?
Oh, absolutely. If there's one thing I'll say about the Sonic movie as well, and the reason why, in my opinion, taking my fandom out of this, I will say that the Sonic movie is the best video game movie ever made. The main reason is because they do an excellent job of having a very low barrier of knowledge for entry. Right. You literally don't need to know a single thing about Sonic the Hedgehog to enjoy this movie. Mm-hmm. They did a really good job explaining why he's fast, why he's on Earth, why all these things. They explained everything from at the very beginning. You don't have to play a single game. Even Detective Pikachu, as good of a movie as it is, there's still a little bit of barrier for entry where you have to know basically like what's the whole deal with Pokemon. I think they did an okay job of explaining it, but there's still that little tiny bit of, okay, you really, really have to be a fan to super enjoy this movie. And that's why I think Sonic did it super well. And that's the problem with video game movies in the past. They either like try too hard to be super close to the source material and it just winds up failing because that sort of story doesn't translate well to a movie.
Case in point, the last Tomb Raider movie. It's like, I feel like they tried really hard to get it to work, to make it feel just like the video game, but I think they tried too hard. But then you get ones like the original Tomb Raider, where it's like, it feels like it, but then they take their own liberties, or even like the Resident Evil movies. Like, they take their own liberties with it to where it's still, it's still a fun movie. Yeah. But at the same time, is it really faithful?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I was actually having a conversation last night about the Doom movie and how they sort of captured Doom, but not quite, and
sort of. Yeah. But then you get ones like the Silent Hill movie that feel right. Yeah. You know, the first one. It's like they feel right. You know, I think we're at a case now where we've realized, hey, with the right sort of care, and we have the technology now that we can make these video game movies great, appeal to the masses, stay true to the source material without it being cringy, like the original Mario Brothers movie, for example. Because you get the ones that go way out of there that it's like, okay, this is based off of a video game. Like, I didn't even know there was a Company of Heroes video game movie. I just learned that. And I'm like, what? So you just never really know like what's going to happen in the future for it. But I think this and Detective Pikachu, I think they're good signs that the future's looking bright. So, but again, just got to have the right care, the right budget, the right people behind them, and listen to the fans for love of everything. You know, have some people on staff. I'm sure you know that there is another Mario Brothers movie that's coming later that Nintendo's working on a CG movie. I think they were with Illumination Entertainment, the team behind Despicable Me and the Minions. I believe that's who it's with, so that's coming. But it's a CG movie, though. Yeah, but if they have so much in hand with it, it's probably going to be good.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about. So I think we're all good.
All right.